his part, actually said it on Trump's face in Alaska. When he met Trump, he said, look, after you've come to power, the business with America has gone up. Russia's business with America has gone up. So he showed him the mirror there. But I was only talking about pure optics, you know, going by the pictures and commentary, even on Russian social media handles. RT, for instance, is, having a go at the pictures of Modi and Putin together. But very quickly, Brahmachalani, I'm sure you're aware of what Peter Navarro has said. Not the first time that he's put his foot in the mouth, but here's a Harvard economist who says things like, why is India in bed with China and Russia? By that he meant, why is Modi meeting Putin and Xi Jinping? And then he went on to, give us that Brahmin sermon.
Well, I think, you have to keep in mind that what Trump is doing is essentially stepping up pressure on India while ensuring that he does not burn diplomatic bridges with Modi. He has unleashed 3 attack dogs on India. The Treasury Secretary, Stock Besant, his trade advisor, Peter Navarro, and his top economic advisor, Kevin Hassett. They are attacking India frequently now. Trump's playbook is simple. While not taking on Modi directly, he is mounting pressure on India in the hope that India will cave in. But the problem is that he doesn't understand India. Through his punitive tariffs and sanctions on India, he's only ensuring one thing, that the US shoots itself in the foot, because heavy-handed pressure will not bend India. It will only compel India to diversify away from India, to at least reduce its dependence on Washington. That will undercut Washington's own economic and strategic interests. We saw what happened in 2022 after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The Biden White House tried to strong-arm India into taking sides in the Ukraine war. It warned India that the costs and consequences of neutrality would be, quote-unquote, significant and long-term. What did that threat do? That bullying only reinforced India's determination to stay neutral. Now, what Trump is doing has nothing to do with Russian oil and everything to do with muscling India into a one-sided trade deal. That is his goal. Nothing to do with Russian oil. If it had anything to do with Russian oil or the Ukraine war, he would have imposed the secondary sanctions on China, which is the world's largest importer of Russian oil and gas, and on Europe. The European Union contributes more to Russia's coffers through its energy imports from Russia than India does by buying Russian oil. The difference is this: Biden's bullying was clumsy, Trump's is nakedly coercive, and just as doomed to fail. Now, if India were to give in or even compromise in some way, you have to just look at the Mexico example. The president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, she is learning the hard way that the more you give in to Trump's pressure tactics, the more he tries to extort, to squeeze. In fact, he boasted the other day, Mexico does what we tell them to do. This is the way he is now crowing in public. But India has no Mexico, nor is India Japan or South Korea or the EU, all of which succumb to Trump's pressure. Trump's crude bargaining tactics will force India to diversify away from the US, to the detriment of Washington's own interests.
But why is the US doing this? You were talking about 3 people that Trump has unleashed. When will this stop? Will they, is there a line, or is this now par for the course, this unhinged attack? Uncivilized language, it does not even make sense Sushant Sareen?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense because, incidentally, you've forgotten that Navarro is not just a Harvard economist, he's also a felon, a convicted felon. He has been put in jail also. So that's the kind of people Trump has surrounded himself with. And he's the guy who Elon Musk very eloquently called dumber than a brick, which is quite clear from everything he said because he knows nothing about India. He uses familiar old tropes to target India. He thinks that by using this kind of language, they're going to be able to pressure India, little realizing that this is precisely the kind of language which will, stiffen India's back. And even if some deal or compromise was possible, becomes even more difficult with this kind of language being used. I think Brahma is absolutely right. This whole Russian oil business is an excuse. It's an excuse for two reasons. One is on the trade deal. But look, on the trade deal, anybody with half a brain knows that India went, virtually to the maximum extent possible in the trade deal that was negotiated with the Americans. There were certain red lines which we were not willing to cross. But beyond that, for most of American products, I think it was a really sweet deal that the Americans were offered. The fact that they decided that they're going to reject it is on them. It's not on us, number one. Number two, on this whole issue of, imposing the kind of tariffs that they've started imposing, I completely agree. There's no justification for it. Why don't you do it on the Europeans? Viktor Orban of Hungary is such a good friend of yours. He has gone against Ukraine directly by saying that the Ukrainians have sabotaged the pipeline bringing him energy sources. Now, if he can, go to that extent and he's your ally and you don't take any action against him, how is it you are taking action against us? But I think there is another factor, which is his personal issues that Trump has, which quite clearly is about that whole Nobel Prize thing. We haven't thanked him enough. We haven't bent low enough for him. We haven't gone on all fours, lying prostrate before him, worshipping him. I think that's also probably riling up these guys. And look, Pranesh, frankly, one never thought we would see such scenes in the United States. These were things that the Western media spoke about countries like North Korea. But the kind of adulation and the kind of bhakti which we saw in Trump's cabinet meeting, it's crazy. It's so cringe. People going out of the way to, I can't use that expression, but it starts with an A and has licking after that. It's crazy what these guys have done, yeah? They made America into a laughing stock, and America has been a great country. It is a great country. But look at the kind of leadership they have. Look at the kind of people leading them. And look at the way they are destroying every single relationship they have built. Forget about us. We are latecomers to, a close friendship with the United States. Look at how they're treating Europe. Not that Europe, has done everything not to be treated like that. Europe has shown that it is utterly spineless, cannot stand up. Despite all the wealth that they have, all the power and technology they have, they're not willing to stand up. So I suppose they will get that treatment. But even otherwise, even if you ignore that, just look at the way they've treated the Europeans. Look at the way they've treated the Japanese and the Koreans. These are their closest allies. These are countries with which America has helped, certainly, but these are countries which are stalwart allies of the United States. You are deliberately trying to alienate every single partner of America. Is this the path to making America great again? Anybody who thinks this is living in cloud cuckoo land, man. And quite clearly, people like Navarro and all, they are arsonists. They are not negotiators. These are arsonists. And that is what they're trying to do. And frankly, the first couple of times it's galling. But after that, you say, okay, fine. These are mad barking dogs, rabid dogs. best to ignore these guys rather than respond to everything they say. And I think people like Navarro need to be treated like,
But we do have
somebody
a measure in place for stray dogs. Mr. Dimitri would not know. But we have now a measure approved by the courts for stray dogs. So maybe that can come in handy. But here's what Putin has said at the SCO. He says Russia adheres to the principle that no country can ensure its security at the expense of another. More importantly, Putin says Russia highly values the efforts of India and other partners in resolving the situation in Ukraine. Srinjoy.
Yes, Putin I'll come to later, but if you think of the Trump administration, the first point is the earlier Trump presidency, and people in government in India are saying this. They are telling you quietly that all these people like Navarro, when in the past, the Trump administration in the past had people like McMaster, who was National Security Advisor, and India got along very well with him. Then they had someone like Mattis. Mattis was Defense Secretary, equivalent to Defense Minister, and he's remembered even more, perhaps because he was there for a longer period of time. So when you had people as competent as McMaster, as Mattis, then you come down to Navarro. There is actually shock in India about this. As far as this issue with Putin is concerned, well, there is a bilateral that's going to happen, and definitely the war will come up during the discussion. But he's also making it very clear that, yes, it is important that India will play an important part in all this. And you saw from the body language, regardless of what happens, what we get to hear about the bilateral, the body language told you very clearly that this is a meeting that both sides are looking forward to. And you saw how lonely Shahbaz Sharif looked, like a little butler waiting on his employers. And then it must be said that this bilateral is going to be very important, because a lot of things will change. In the past, Indo-Russian ties, whatever you say, was like a three-legged stool. It depended on defense, it depended on space,
right,
and civil aviation and civil nuclear issues. Now there is a fourth leg. So the tool has become a chair, because trade is an important thing. And what we expect and what is likely to come now is the fact that the Russians will say, okay, the Americans are cutting you off. We would like to import more Indian consumer goods, and more other goods from India is what is expected after this bilateral.
Look, my point is that, two countries can have differences, and, you don't have to necessarily agree with each other on everything. But, and there can be disagreements, but this is not the kind of approach, the one adopted by Trump and by unleashing people like Navarro and the two others that Brahma Chalani named. And like Sushant Sareen is saying, that some of what they've been saying is not even making sense to the Americans. How can Trump lecture India about, its business with Russia when America is already importing more than it used to do in the Biden administration's time? So that is one. Then you have the hypocrisy on EU. Then on the Chinese, because Chinese clearly import more Russian oil than India does. But, it started with a 90-day concession. Brahma Chalani, when Trump came to the Oval Office in his second term, people said, look, the man is erratic. But nobody thought that we would, see scenes like these.
Trump is a changed man. We should not forget that Trump's first term was the best period for US-India relations. India-US relations thrived during his first term. I don't think there has been any other US president under whom America's relations with India thrived the way they thrived during Trump's first term. He gave India pride of place in his Indo-Pacific strategy. He fundamentally changed America's China policy. From Nixon to Barack Obama, the US policy was to aid, to help in China's economic rise. It was Trump who fundamentally changed that policy. It was Trump in his first term who also changed America's policy on Pakistan. He ended all security assistance to Pakistan. That brought about a complete transformation in US-India relations. He was addressing India's long-standing regional security concerns. Then came Joe Biden, who went back to coddling Pakistan, to pursuing a conciliatory approach towards China, who began using the Khalistan card against India, the human rights card against India. Biden upgraded and modernized Pakistan's F-16 fleet against India, essentially. He made it more lethal, the F-16s of Pakistan, made them more lethal against India. All this happened under Joe Biden, and everybody thought that with Trump returning to the White House, the old golden era of US-India relations would again be ushered in. Lo and behold, what Trump is doing in his second term is using disruption as his virtual doctrine. He has not just undermined the relationship with India. America's close allies, the European Union, Japan, South Korea, Mexico, Canada in particular, all these countries are bearing the brunt of Trump's focus not on grand strategy, but on narrow transactional considerations. So India, of course, is the first victim of his secondary sanctions. So India has this dubious honor of having become Trump's target number one in terms of secondary sanctions. But we should not lose sight of the bigger picture. What he's doing in his second term, he is undermining America's long-term interests. He is a threat to America's own interests, because when history is written, history will not be kind to him.
But who will say this to him? Because like Sushant Sareen said, the kind of subservience that we've seen by the people closest to him, the people around him, by which I mean his, cabinet colleagues, I don't think there's anyone who will muster that courage. Or maybe they know that this is not the way to, deal with Trump. As long as you can, reap the benefits of power. Just tell him what he likes to hear. Sinjoy?
See, there's no adult in the room when you look at the cabinet. The only person you thought is the adult in the room is Marco Rubio. Because whatever you say about Marco Rubio, he has a background. He's been a senior politician. He's been a player in all these years. But even Rubio, to a large extent, has been silent, or he has chosen not to contradict his government. You would imagine him to be bright enough to know that his government is doing serious damage. But he has chosen to be silent a number of times. And then to unleash, and that word is actually right, the kind of people that he has is really very surprising.
Right, just hold your thoughts. I'm sorry to interrupt. We have the highlights of the Tianjin declaration. Swati Joshi, our colleague who's in Tianjin, has sent us this. It says, and I'm reading the statement, the member states strongly condemned the terrorist attack in Pahalgam on 22nd April. They expressed their deepest sympathy and condolences to the families of the dead and the wounded. They further stated that perpetrators, organizers, sponsors of such attacks must be brought to justice. The member states, while reaffirming their firm commitment to the fight against terror, separatism and extremism, stressed the inadmissibility of the attempts to use terrorists, separatists and extremist groups for mercenary purposes. They recognize the leading role of sovereign states and their competent authorities in countering terrorist and extremist threats. The member states strongly condemn terrorism in all its forms and manifestations, stress that the double standards in the fight against terror is unacceptable, and call on international community to combat terror. So Sushant Sareen was right. You know, this is that statement that we were expecting. Nothing surprising. Obviously, China has ensured that Pakistan is not named.
No, but Pranesh, if I might just come here, I think this statement has gone much further than what I expected. I'll be very honest about it. I think it's gone a lot further than what I expected. And okay, like I said, it was not going to name and shame anybody, but it pretty much covers everything that we wanted, at least insofar as terrorism is concerned, to be included. So I think the Indian diplomatic establishment can pat itself on the back for at least this part of the joint statement coming out. I would say it's everything you could have expected and wanted, unless of course you wanted everybody to gang up and say that Pakistan is responsible, etc., which was not going to happen. This was probably the best we could have expected, and it's happened.
Mr. Babij, what do you make of this Tianjin declaration for whatever it's worth?
Are you asking me?
I'm sorry, is the question to me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's for you.
Okay. Well, I think the Tianjin Declaration is very important because what we see now in the world is not a conflict between East and West. It's not a conflict between Russia and Ukraine or Russia and European countries. It's a conflict between two approaches to world politics. One is the American and the European approach, when you appoint certain countries as villains, when you just don't talk to them, you ignore their interests. And the other approach we see in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, we see it in BRICS. All kinds of countries are members of these groups. You have the communist countries such as, China. You have the democracies such as India and Brazil. You have theocracies, in BRICS. Iran is an observant nation. So, there is Egypt, there is Ethiopia. So all kinds of countries are members. No one is teaching, no one is lecturing other members how they should behave. This is one approach. The other one is the Western approach. When you declare certain countries democracies, and they're good, and you declare other countries autocracies, and anything goes against them. This is simply dangerous. In the 21st century, this doesn't work. So the message, I think, from Tianjin, the message that we read in this declaration is respect all countries, Do not break international law. It was the West, after all, who continuously has been breaking international law, at least since the early 90s, The attack on Yugoslavia was not sanctioned by the UN. The actions of the United States and of Europe in such countries as Libya, Syria, this was all not sanctioned by the UN. It was all against sovereign countries. Whatever we think about the regimes that existed in Libya or in Syria or in Yugoslavia, the way the West treated them is unacceptable. So this is the message that we hear from Tianjin, and I think historical experience teaches us that the more inclusive approach will prevail. Let me remind you, during the Second World War, the Nazi bloc was united, and it was opposed by a motley crew coalition of communists, American Democrats, such as Mr. Roosevelt, British imperialists, such as Mr. Churchill, and suddenly the motley crew won. The same thing during the Cold War, The Soviet bloc was much more united than the Western, I would say, constellation of countries. In the Soviet bloc, you had politburos, you had discipline, You had roughly similar political systems everywhere.
Well,
Who won?
Mr. Babish, let me ask you this. Whose war is the Ukraine war? Trump administration says this is India's war. As a Russian, you know, how does it feel?
This is precisely the reason why this war started. I think it was avoidable. Let me remind you that the hostilities did not start in 2022. The hostilities started when the legally elected president of Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych, whatever we think about him, was ousted violently, illegally, with open help from the European Union and the United States. 38 policemen were killed in February 2014 when he was deposed. Show me a country where a government would tolerate 38 policemen being killed, a few more hundreds maimed and injured, and then the United States and Europe say this was a peaceful protest that brought Yanukovych down. So basically it all started with Western interference, unapologetic, in the same way we see this interference now in Asia, when the United States and Europe sometimes, when they divide Asian countries into democracies and autocracies, when they lecture India, when they lecture Azerbaijan, when they lecture Arab countries how they should behave. The message from Tianjin is respect for everyone, return the central role to the United Nations, stop manipulating the United Nations, saying that, the global South is all against Russia or all against some other country.
Right.
Respect even the countries that you don't like, such as Iran and a few other countries which the Western world.
Let me bring in Mr. Brahmachalani. Brahmachalani, this is the Tianjin Declaration, and spare a thought for what Shahbaz Sharif must be feeling. Called out at the SCO for sponsoring terror?
I wouldn't go that far. It's generalized language resembling the UN General Assembly resolution following the Pahalgam massacre. Unfortunately, in India, we take comfort in words. We are too focused on declarations, on processes, not on actions. There's nothing in this wording of the declaration that's different from what the G7 has said or what the UN General Assembly said. This was a declaration by consensus. There is no direct mention of Pakistan, and nor is there any implied attack on Pakistan. It's a very general language. So let's be clear on that. And I think it's what we should be asking ourselves, whether China's attitude and policy will change. It's so easy for China to sign on, to agree to a declaration at Tianjin. Will it stop blocking UN's designation of Pakistan-based terrorist entities and individuals? Will it stop shielding Pakistan? Will it stop aiding and abetting Pakistan's terrorism against India? It's been aiding and abetting Pakistan's terrorism against India for a long time.
I don't think we are going to have a situation where China stops aiding and patronizing terror groups in Pakistan or Pakistan itself, Sushant Sareen, because Pakistan is being treated as a lackey, for lack of a better word, by China, and that's the geopolitical compulsion.
Look, a couple of things. One, I think, okay, Brahma makes a correct point, but I think he's being rather harsh on the issue of these declarations. So, for example, if I was to turn this whole question around and said that, okay, in the past, when SCO declarations were taking place and we did not sign on to the references to BRI because of our objections to the Belt and Road Initiative, especially because it passes through territory which India says is India's sovereign right to decide, and it is under illegal occupation of Pakistan. It was just a declaration. We should have signed on. We did not have to follow through with, building a BRI. So when declarations are made, for example, on the issue of terrorism, we have to be realistic. No one country would be singled out and named. It has not happened anywhere. Right? So you will not single out and name a country in a multilateral declaration like this. But what you will do is that you will, in that whole that typical diplomatic language, you will leave enough, pointers to suggest that you are against what has happened in Pahalgam. And Pahalgam has been named. So I think that's an indication enough. Now that's one way of looking at it. So it depends on whether you want to see the glass half empty or glass half full. Will the Chinese lean upon the Pakistanis to stop all kinds of terrorism? In the past, and I'm not an advocate of China, but in the past, there have been instances where the Chinese have counseled the Pakistanis to back off from the kind of madness that they have been showing in their relationship with India. There have been Chinese presidents who have gone to Pakistan and in front of Pakistani legislators said that you need to sort your relations with India and there will be some problems which history will solve, you can't solve. So you normalize your relationship. The Pakistanis haven't listened to them. Okay? That's the reality. And I think there are limits to what one country can push another one. The Americans have never pushed the Pakistanis, have they? Even when we were BFFs of America, or supposedly BFFs, even at that point of time, how much did the Americans actually push them? So the Americans also gave us words. There was a lot of verbiage in American-Indian, joint statements. But did the Americans really lean on them, pressure the Pakistanis to close down the terror factories that run in that country? Except for once, which was during the FATF, when they really turned the squeeze on, and the Pakistanis were forced to take certain steps, even if those steps were an eyewash and purely cosmetic and on paper, but they were forced to take certain steps. So it's not as though the Americans forced the Pakistanis to do something which we wanted them to do. So I think we need to be realistic about what can be achieved and what cannot be achieved in these kind of, diplomatic forums. And at the end of the day, Pranesh, let's make no mistake about it. You want to control terrorism, you'll have to do it with your own resources and with your own forces. There is no other way of controlling
absolutely
terrorism.
right about that. You need to show world some might, like we've shown in Operation Sindoor. That's the only language that, and that's the language of power that can curb terrorism or any other disruptive power that is staring India in the eye. So, Sushant Sareen, completely agree with you. Sanjoy Chaudhary was making a point quickly. Yes. Then we go to
At
Swati.
the end of the day, India will have to show that it can do what it can do. So, Sindoor, Balakot, surgical strikes. But the Americans did once. I think Musharraf was the one who said that, was it Richard Armitage, had apparently told him that if you don't do what we tell you, we'll bomb you into the Stone Age. It's a very American-sounding phrase. So it's quite possible that the Americans had actually said that. So that was at least one time when the Pakistanis were told to actually...
You're reading too much into that. I
No,
knew
not
Sushant
necessarily.
Sareen, hand going up, Sushant Sareen.
Okay, Sinjoy, yes, the Americans warned the Pakistanis. And then what happened? For 20 years, the Americans were had in Afghanistan. The Pakistanis promised them everything. On the face of it, they did everything. They even arrested the Taliban ambassador and threw him to Guantanamo. But what were they doing behind the scenes?
I
They
remember
were-
Richard Armitage's statement, we'll bomb you into the Stone Age.
And
Surely you remember that.
said we'll bomb you into Stone Age and gave them bombs and weapons. So that's the American hypocrisy. Sushant Sareen,
Richard Armitage, I think,
So
who said that.
they had bombed the Pakistanis, and the Pakistanis, even though every year the Americans knew what the Pakistanis were doing, they knew the games that the Pakistanis were playing, they knew the Pakistani treachery, they were aware of it. What did they do about it? All that they were doing is do more, do more, do more. And the Pakistanis were saying, yeah, yes, master, yes, sir, we will do whatever you ask us to do. Give us some more dollar. They would take the dollar, take everything else, and not do it. They gave the Taliban a free hand. They gave Al-Qaeda a free hand in that country. Did they not?
And
So
now
what
the
did
Americans are looking for oil and minerals in Pakistan, in a region, in a country that is, infested with terror. They are looking for oil and minerals.
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to ET Now.